Sarah Chen wiped sweat from her forehead as she checked the temperature readings in her family's experimental greenhouse. At 16, she already knew more about botanical genetics than most graduate students, thanks to growing up in a family of plant scientists. The summer air was thick with humidity and the sweet scent of her latest hybrid orchids, a project she hoped would win this year's National Science Fair. A flash of purple light caught her attention, reflecting off the glass walls. She turned, expecting to see lightning from an approaching storm, but the sky outside remained clear. The light pulsed again, this time from behind the row of temperature-controlled growing chambers. "Hello." Sarah called out, grabbing a garden trowel, the closest thing to a weapon within reach. "Is someone there?" The answer came as a series of clicks and whistles, followed by labored breathing. Sarah crept forward, her heart pounding. Behind the chambers lay a creature that defied explanation. About the size of a human adult, its body was covered in iridescent scales that shifted between deep purple and midnight blue. Multiple pairs of arms clutched a wound in its torso, where a viscous silver fluid leaked onto the greenhouse floor. The creature's eyes met hers, 3 of them, arranged in a triangle pattern, and Sarah saw intelligence there, along with pain and desperation. Where another person might have screamed or run, Sarah felt her scientific mind kick into high gear. The being was clearly advanced enough for interstellar travel, had opposable thumbs on each hand, and appeared to be breathing Earth's atmosphere without difficulty. "You're hurt," she said softly, setting down the trowel. "I want to help." The alien's breathing steadied slightly, and it produced a small device from one of its many pockets. A holographic display appeared between them, showing Earth surrounded by approaching vessels. "Are those ships coming here?" Sarah asked, pointing at the display. The alien nodded, a surprisingly human gesture, and tried to sit up. Its scales rippled with pain, and more silver fluid seeped from the wound. Sarah made a decision. She pulled out her phone and opened her botanical database app. "I need to stop that bleeding first," she said, more to herself than her unexpected visitor. "Those are cellular repair proteins leaking out, aren't they? The fluid is too viscous to be simple blood." Another nod. The alien watched with obvious interest as Sarah quickly searched through her database. "The Dendrobium spectabile," she muttered, hurrying to a nearby shelf. "Its sap forms an instant polymer matrix when exposed to air. Should work as a temporary bandage." Sarah carefully harvested sap from one of her experimental orchids, applying it directly to the alien's wound. The sap immediately began to harden, forming a flexible seal. The silver fluid stopped leaking, and the alien's breathing eased. A series of gentle chirps emerged from what Sarah assumed was its speech organ. The holographic display shifted, showing symbols she didn't recognize but assumed was writing, followed by an image of a creature that looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a mechanical harvester. "These are the ones coming?" Sarah asked, pointing to the mantis-like beings. The alien nodded again, then touched its chest with one hand. Symbols appeared above the hologram, followed by sounds, kvex. "Doctor." "A doctor? A scientist?" Sarah felt excitement building despite the apparent danger. "I'm Sarah. I'm a scientist too, well, learning to be one." Dr. Kvex's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, and the hologram changed to show complex molecular structures. Sarah recognized some of them, they were similar to Earth plant proteins she'd studied. The alien pointed to her orchids, then back to the molecular display. "You're interested in our plants?" Sarah asked. "Is that why you're here?" Before Kvex could answer, a deep thrumming sound filled the air. Through the greenhouse glass, Sarah saw purple light similar to what had heralded Kvex's arrival, but much more intense. Kvex's scales darkened with what Sarah interpreted as alarm. The hologram shifted again, showing the mantis-like creatures systematically harvesting resources from various planets. Each world they touched turned gray and lifeless in the display. "They're not just coming to study us," Sarah realized, her blood running cold. "They're coming to take everything." Kvex nodded solemnly, then pointed to Sarah's orchids again. The hologram showed the molecular structures, then simulated them interacting with what appeared to be the mantis creature's technology. The simulation showed the technology failing. Sarah's eyes widened as she understood. "Our plants, something in their biochemistry disrupts their systems." She quickly pulled up her research notes on her tablet. "The proteins I've been modifying for drought resistance, they're similar to these structures in your diagram." The alien scientist's scales shifted to a brighter blue, which Sarah took as confirmation. More images appeared, Kvex's people fighting against the mantis creatures, losing badly. A resistance movement, scattered across the galaxy, looking for ways to stop the harvesters. "You came here because you detected my experiments," Sarah said, the pieces falling into place. "But they followed you." Kvex nodded, then winced as movement aggravated the wound. The hologram showed ships entering Earth's atmosphere within hours. Sarah looked at her life's work surrounding them in the greenhouse, plants she'd modified to survive extreme conditions, to produce stronger proteins, to resist disease. Now those same experiments might be Earth's only hope. "How long do we have?" she asked, already pulling sample containers from the shelves. Kvex held up 4 fingers. 4 hours until the harvesters arrived. "Then we better get to work," Sarah said, her scientific mind already racing with possibilities. "I'll need you to tell me everything you know about their technology, and I mean everything. We're going to give these harvesters a welcome they'll never forget." Outside, the summer sky darkened as clouds began to gather. But Sarah knew the real storm was yet to come. She and her alien colleague had 4 hours to turn her family's greenhouse into humanity's first line of defense. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt strangely calm. This was what science was for, solving problems, protecting life, advancing knowledge. She looked at Kvex and managed a smile. "Let's show them what happens when they mess with Earth's botanists." Sarah's fingers flew across her tablet as she documented Kvex's revelations. The alien scientist had managed to stand, though still unsteady, and was analyzing samples from her hybrid orchids with a device that looked like a crystalline microscope. "So your people have been fighting these harvesters for centuries?" Sarah asked, watching as Kvex's device projected detailed molecular structures into the air between them. Kvex made an affirmative chirp, the scales around its speech organ shifting to a deep indigo. The holographic display showed dozens of worlds, once vibrant with life, reduced to barren rocks. The harvesters didn't just collect specimens, they stripped entire ecosystems, leaving nothing behind. "But why haven't they taken Earth already? We must have been vulnerable for thousands of years." The alien scientist's response came as a series of images: Earth's position in the galaxy, relatively isolated, humanity's rapid technological development, and most importantly, the unique properties of Earth's plant life. Kvex highlighted specific protein chains in Sarah's orchids, then showed them interfacing with harvester technology. "Our plants evolved differently," Sarah realized, examining the molecular models. "The protein structures, they're completely foreign to their systems. Like trying to run Windows software on a quantum computer." Kvex's scales rippled with what might have been amusement at the analogy. The alien pulled up more data, showing how Earth's isolated evolution had produced biological systems unlike anything else in the charted galaxy. The harvester's technology, designed to process and extract resources from thousands of worlds, had never encountered anything like it. Sarah grabbed a sample from her latest experiment, an orchid hybrid designed to survive extreme temperature changes. Under Kvex's analyzer, its molecular structure appeared even more exotic than the standard samples. "My modifications," Sarah said, excitement building. "They've made the proteins even more incompatible. Look at these binding sites, they'd completely disrupt their harvesting fields." A warning tone from Kvex's communicator interrupted their analysis. The harvester fleet had accelerated. They now had less than 3 hours. We need to scale this up, Sarah said, running to her family's main research database. Mom and Dad have been developing rapid growth formulas for crop production. If we combine that with my temperature-resistant hybrids. Kvex moved to join her but stumbled, the makeshift bandage on its wound straining. Sarah caught the alien scientist with surprising strength. You need to rest, she insisted. I can access the formulas. Just keep analyzing the samples I bring you. As Sarah dug through years of family research, she fought down her rising panic. Her parents were at a conference in Singapore, unreachable in time. The authorities would never believe her without proof. They were on their own. The next hour passed in a blur of activity. Sarah combined her hybrid orchids with her parents' growth accelerants, while Kvex analyzed each iteration. The alien's wound slowly stabilized, though the scientist refused to rest, working just as frantically as Sarah. There's something we're missing, Sarah muttered, staring at their latest test results. The modified plants would disrupt harvester technology, but not fast enough to stop a full invasion. We need a delivery system. Kvex's hologram shifted to show the harvester ship's design. They used massive energy fields to collect and process resources, breaking down organic matter at the molecular level. Sarah watched the simulation, her mind racing. Wait, she said, pointing to the energy field distribution. These collection beams, they're like massive vacuum cleaners, right? Sucking up everything in their path. The alien confirmed her understanding. Sarah grinned. Then we give them something to choke on. She pulled up her earlier experiments with airborne spores. What if we modify the plants to release their proteins as a fine powder? When their beams try to collect it. Kvex's scales shifted to bright azure, excitement. The alien quickly ran simulations showing the modified spores interacting with harvester collection fields. The results were promising, complete system failure within seconds of contact. We need to start production immediately, Sarah said, already moving to the greenhouse's industrial growth chambers. And we need to get the word out somehow. The whole world needs to be ready. Kvex's communicator chimed again. The harvester fleet had changed formation. They weren't just coming to collect, they were preparing for full invasion. They must have detected Kvex's presence. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. In less than 2 hours, Earth would face its first alien invasion. Their only defense was a handful of modified plants and 2 scientists, 1 human, 1 alien, working in a greenhouse. She looked at Kvex, who had managed to stabilize enough to help her prepare the growth chambers. The alien scientist met her gaze with all 3 eyes. I know, Sarah said, answering the unspoken question. It seems impossible. But that's kind of what humans specialize in. The growth chambers hummed to life as Sarah loaded them with her hybrid specimens. Outside, storm clouds finally began to gather, as if nature itself was preparing for battle. They had 2 hours to turn her family's greenhouse into a weapons factory, using nothing but modified flowers and human ingenuity. Sarah checked her calculations one last time. Let them come, she whispered, more to herself than to Kvex. They have no idea what Earth's plants can do. The alien scientist made a sound that might have been agreement, and together they began the final preparations for humanity's strangest, and perhaps most important, scientific experiment. Would you like me to continue with part 3, where they implement their plan and face the beginning of the invasion? The growth chambers pulsed with an eerie green light as Sarah's modified orchids multiplied at an unprecedented rate. She'd converted all 12 industrial-sized chambers to produce her hybrid specimens, each one optimized to generate maximum amounts of disruptive proteins. The spore production is exceeding projections, she told Kvex, checking the latest readings. But we're going to need a way to distribute them when the harvesters arrive. Kvex's holographic display showed the approaching fleet, now less than an hour away. The alien scientist had rigged a makeshift broadcasting system using parts from their damaged ship, but so far, all attempts to contact authorities had been met with skepticism or silence. Sarah's phone buzzed. Another message from the police, dismissing her warnings as a prank. She fought down her frustration and focused on the task at hand. "Okay, think," she muttered, watching the growth chambers. "We have the ultimate biological weapon against their technology. We just need to get it into their collection beams." Kvex chirped excitedly, pulling up schematics of local weather patterns. The storm that had been threatening all afternoon was building into something massive. The alien pointed to the atmospheric circulation patterns, then to their modified spores. "The storm," Sarah breathed, understanding immediately. "If we release the spores into the upper atmosphere, the storm will disperse them across the entire region. When they try to activate their collection beams." The alien scientist's scales rippled with approval. They had a delivery system, nature itself would help defend Earth. Sarah quickly modified the growth chamber's ventilation systems, redirecting them to concentrate the spore output. Kvex worked just as rapidly, adjusting their molecular structure to make them light enough to remain airborne in the storm. A deep rumble shook the greenhouse. Not thunder, something entering the atmosphere. "They're early," Sarah said, checking Kvex's monitors. The first wave of harvester ships had begun their descent, their massive forms casting shadows through the storm clouds. Kvex's wound was nearly healed thanks to the cellular repair proteins in Sarah's bandage solution, allowing the alien to move more freely. Together, they made final adjustments to the ventilation system. "We only get one shot at this," Sarah said, watching the spore concentration readings climb. "If the initial dispersal doesn't work." She didn't need to finish the thought. Kvex's hologram showed what would happen: systematic destruction of Earth's biosphere, beginning with the most unique specimens, exactly where they were standing. The first harvester ship appeared through the clouds, its design as insectoid as its operators. The vessel was enormous, easily the size of a small city, with collection arrays extending like vast, metallic wings. Sarah's modified plants had filled the growth chambers with a fine, iridescent powder, concentrated packets of proteins specifically engineered to disrupt harvester technology. Now they just had to wait for the right moment. "They're scanning," Sarah noted, watching the ship's energy patterns on Kvex's displays. "Looking for the most efficient collection points." More ships appeared, taking position in a grid pattern above the region. Their presence affected the brewing storm, intensifying it with their massive energy fields. Lightning crackled between the clouds, illuminating the alien vessels in brief, brilliant flashes. Kvex's communicator suddenly activated, broadcasting in multiple frequencies. The harvester's message translated into simple terms: surrender valuable specimens or face complete ecological extraction. Sarah checked the spore concentration one last time. "Ready?" Kvex confirmed with a solemn chirp. The alien scientist had already warned her that this plan might destroy their own equipment as well. The spores wouldn't discriminate between friendly and hostile technology. The first collection beam activated, a column of purple energy descending from the nearest ship. It touched down several miles away, and Sarah watched in horror as a section of forest was instantly reduced to its component molecules. "Now," she shouted, activating the ventilation system at full power. Thousands of growth chambers across the facility released their contents simultaneously. The modified spores shot upward, caught immediately by the strengthening storm winds. Kvex's displays showed them dispersing in a rapidly expanding cloud, riding the turbulent air currents directly into the paths of the collection beams. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Where the spores made contact with the energy fields, they caused cascading failures. Purple beams flickered and died. Ships that tried to activate new collection points found their systems shorting out instantly. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the harvester fleet attempted to compensate. They adjusted frequencies, tried different collection patterns, but each attempt met the same result. The storm had carried Sarah's biological defense system throughout the entire regional atmosphere. "It's working," Sarah breathed, watching more ships lose collection capability. They can't establish stable energy fields anywhere in the dispersion zone. HFY's scales had turned a brilliant blue, triumph. The aliens' displays showed the harvester fleet falling into disarray. Without their collection technology, they had no way to harvest Earth's resources. But their victory celebration was premature. A new sound cut through the storm, a deep, resonating hum that made the greenhouse walls vibrate. "What are they doing?" Sarah asked, watching as the harvester ships regrouped in a tight formation. HFY's answer came through the holographic display: if they couldn't harvest Earth's resources, they would simply destroy them. The fleet was preparing to bombard the surface. Sarah felt her momentary elation turn to ice. They'd stopped the harvest, but in doing so, they'd pushed the invaders to more desperate measures. Now they had minutes, maybe seconds, to find a way to protect Earth from orbital bombardment. She looked at her remaining samples, then at HFY's technology. "We need a new plan," she said. "Fast." The storm raged overhead as the harvester fleet took up attack positions. They'd won the first round, but the real battle for Earth was just beginning. Thunder crashed overhead as Sarah frantically analyzed the data streaming across her tablet. The harvester ships had arranged themselves in an attack formation, their weapons charging with the same purple energy they'd used for collection. "The spores won't work against direct energy weapons," she said, watching HFY's holographic simulations. "We need something more substantial." The alien scientists' displays showed the devastating potential of the harvester's weapons. Entire regions could be reduced to ash in seconds. But something in the simulation caught Sarah's attention. "Wait," she said, pointing to the energy signatures. "They're weapons, they're using the same basic technology as their collection beams, just focused differently." HFY confirmed with an excited chirp. The alien scales shifted to a thoughtful green as they understood Sarah's line of thinking. "Then we don't need to stop the weapons themselves," Sarah said, already running to the experimental section of the greenhouse. "We need to disrupt their targeting systems." She reached a sealed chamber containing her latest project, plants engineered to survive extreme radiation by producing highly reflective proteins in their cell walls. The specimens gleamed like living mirrors. "The same proteins that make our plants incompatible with their systems," Sarah explained, carefully extracting samples, "can be modified to reflect their targeting frequencies." HFY's analyzer confirmed her theory. The reflective proteins, when properly tuned, could scatter the harvester's targeting beams. But they needed far more than a few experimental plants. A deep thrumming shook the greenhouse as the first ship prepared to fire. They had minutes at most. "The growth accelerant," Sarah said, rushing to the storage unit. "We need to distribute it across the entire botanical garden. Every plant out there needs to start producing these proteins." HFY worked rapidly, combining Sarah's reflective specimens with the accelerant while she reprogrammed the greenhouse's irrigation system. Outside, the storm intensified, driven by the massive energy buildup in the harvester fleet. Sarah's phone suddenly buzzed, a call from the local emergency management office. Finally, someone was taking their warning seriously. "Yes, this is Sarah Chen," she answered, still working on the irrigation controls. "I know you see them. Listen carefully, I need you to activate every irrigation system, every sprinkler, every fountain in the city. Right now." There was skepticism in the official's voice, but the sight of alien warships in attack position made them receptive to unusual suggestions. They promised to comply within 5 minutes. "That's all the time we're likely to have anyway," Sarah muttered after hanging up. She turned to HFY. "Ready?" The alien scientist had finished the modifications. They'd combined Sarah's reflective plant proteins with the growth accelerant and her father's latest drought-resistant strain. The result was a silvery liquid that would force any plant it touched to produce reflective proteins within minutes. Sarah activated the irrigation system at maximum pressure. Modified sprinklers sprayed their solution across the entire botanical garden. The effect was almost immediate. Plants began to take on a metallic sheen, their leaves and flowers becoming natural mirrors. HFY displays showed the protein production spreading rapidly through the garden's vegetation. But it wouldn't be enough to protect the whole city. A high-pitched whine cut through the air as the first harvester ship locked onto its target. Purple energy gathered at its weapon ports. Then the city's emergency systems activated. Every sprinkler, every fountain, every irrigation system began spraying their solution across the urban landscape. Parks, gardens, street trees, all began to transform. The first harvester ship fired. A beam of concentrated purple energy lanced down from the sky, and scattered. The beam split into thousands of harmless fragments, reflected by the transformed vegetation below. More ships fired, but each attack met the same fate. The transformed plants didn't just absorb or deflect the energy, they scattered it in unpredictable patterns that made targeting impossible. Some beams even reflected back at the fleet, forcing ships to raise their shields. Sarah watched in amazement as her city's vegetation became its shield. Trees glittered like Christmas decorations, grass shimmered like fields of metallic wheat, and every garden became a reflective barrier against orbital bombardment. But the harvesters weren't finished. The ships began to descend, presumably to deploy ground forces. HFY's scales darkened with concern. Direct combat wasn't part of their defense plan. Actually, Sarah said, a new idea forming as she watched the ships lower through the storm clouds, this might be exactly what we need. She turned to the growth chambers, where her original hybrid orchids were still producing their disruptive spores. They're coming down into the spore cloud. And with this storm, HFY's scales shifted to bright azure as they understood. The harvesters were abandoning their strongest tactical advantage, altitude, and descending into an atmosphere saturated with proteins that could disable their technology. We didn't just create a shield, Sarah realized, watching the first ships enter the cloud layer. We created a trap. Above them, the storm reached its peak intensity, and humanity's first interstellar battle entered its final phase. The harvester ships descended through the storm clouds like massive metal insects, their hulls gleaming with purple energy. But as they entered the spore-saturated atmosphere, something remarkable happened. First one ship, then another, began experiencing system failures. Their smooth descent became erratic as navigation systems crashed. Weapons arrays flickered and died. Communication channels filled with static. Sarah and HFY watched from the greenhouse as their trap sprung perfectly. The alien scientists' displays showed cascading failures throughout the harvester fleet. Their environmental seals, Sarah realized, watching the data scroll across HFY's holographic screens. They're not designed to filter out organic particles this small. The modified spores weren't just disrupting external systems anymore, they were working their way into the ships themselves. HFY's scales rippled with excitement as they confirmed Sarah's observation. The harvester's own life support systems were circulating the disruptive proteins throughout their vessels. Several ships attempted emergency landings, their crews desperate to escape the invisible biological assault. Others tried to retreat to higher altitudes, but their engines sputtered and failed. Should we be worried about them crashing into the city? Sarah asked, watching a particularly large vessel listing dangerously close to downtown. HFY's response came through the hologram. The harvester ships, despite their massive size, were surprisingly light. Their technology relied more on energy manipulation than physical mass. Most would float to the ground like fallen leaves rather than crash. True to HFY's prediction, the disabled ships began to settle slowly earthward, caught in the storm's currents. Their fearsome weapons hung dark and lifeless, their complex technology rendered useless by nothing more than flower pollen. Sarah's phone exploded with notifications. Videos of the descending ships were going viral. Military jets circled the area, but held their fire. There was no need. The invasion had been stopped by a teenage botanist and her alien ally. HFY's communicator suddenly activated, receiving signals from multiple sources. The alien scales shifted to a color Sarah hadn't seen before, something between hope and vindication. "More of your people?" she asked. The holographic display confirmed her guess. Ships were appearing at the edge of the solar system, but these weren't harvesters. They were representatives of HFY's resistance movement, along with delegates from something called the Galactic Council. "They're coming to help clean up?" Sarah guessed. HFY's response revealed something more significant. The Council had been watching Earth for decades, debating whether humanity was ready for contact. The Harvester invasion had forced their hand, but humanity's response had proven far more impressive than anyone expected. "We didn't just defend ourselves," Sarah understood, looking at the new data HFY was showing her. "We found a way to stop the Harvesters completely. Something no other civilization has managed." The alien scientist confirmed enthusiastically. Earth's unique biology, combined with human ingenuity, had created a defense that could protect not just one world, but any planet the Harvesters might threaten. As the storm began to clear, more ships appeared in the sky, elegant vessels unlike the insectoid Harvester craft. They took up position around the disabled invasion fleet, beginning containment and recovery operations. Sarah's phone rang again. This time it was her parents, calling from Singapore in a panic after seeing the news. She took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad," she said, looking at HFY with a smile, "remember how you always said my plant experiments would change the world someday? Well, funny story. In the days that followed, Earth underwent changes that would have seemed impossible hours before. The Galactic Council established formal diplomatic relations. HFY's resistance movement began working with Earth scientists to develop planetary defense systems using Sarah's discoveries. But perhaps most importantly, humanity learned it wasn't alone, and that their particular brand of problem-solving was something the galaxy desperately needed. Sarah stood in the greenhouse a week later, examining a new batch of hybrid orchids. HFY worked nearby, now officially Earth's first alien scientific advisor. The alien scales had settled into a comfortable blue-green that Sarah had come to recognize as contentment. "You know what's funny?" she said, carefully pollinating a promising specimen. "All those sci-fi stories about aliens invading Earth, and we ended up stopping them with flowers." HFY made a sound that might have been laughter. The aliens' hologram displayed their latest project, a modified version of Sarah's defense system that could be adapted for different planetary environments. Outside, construction crews were breaking ground on the new Interstellar Botanical Research Center. Sarah's greenhouse would become its first laboratory, dedicated to developing biological solutions to cosmic problems. The Harvesters never returned to Earth. Perhaps it was the humiliation of being defeated by plants, or maybe it was the knowledge that their technology could be rendered useless by something as simple as flower pollen. Either way, humanity's first major interstellar threat had been overcome not with advanced weapons or superior technology, but with the simple, elegant solutions that nature had spent billions of years perfecting. Sarah looked at the symbiotic relationship between her orchids and their newly introduced alien nutrients, a small example of how humanity and alien life could work together. "I guess sometimes," she mused, "the best way to reach for the stars is to start in your own backyard." HFY's scales shifted to bright azure in agreement, and together they continued their work, pushing the boundaries of what was possible when human creativity met alien wisdom. The greenhouse, once just a place for local botanical research, had become humanity's first step into a much larger garden, one that stretched across the stars themselves.